what defines success for your business? If you don't understand your mission, if you don't understand what's going to define success for your business, you're sure as heck going to have a hard time getting there, right? You don't know where you're going unless you know where you want to go.
Welcome to the Dr. J.J. Thomas Podcast.
I'm Dr. J.J. Thomas. Thanks for joining today. We're going to talk about having a mission mindset in your business. I'm not military, right? Like I never served in the military. I wasn't raised by a military parent. But I have a lot of respect for military professionals. And I think a lot of people in the world do. And I think the reason that is that they have a mission mindset. Their profession puts them in a path where they're training for a mission. And they have a systematic approach to ensure delivery of that mission. We, whether you realize it or not, we already adopt a mission mindset when it comes to treating our patients. So we have a systematic way that we ensure that we're going to deliver results for our patients. If we take that same mindset and we apply it to our business, we're going to ensure results as well. So let's talk about the components of what a mission mindset really means. When someone's given a mission, and I like the military example because it gives you this like very important, purpose, right? Like a mission is something that's very important and has a huge purpose to it, right? So with a mission mindset, the systematic approach, the number one thing that our leaders are going to do in a mission is help everyone understand the mission. So we have to understand the mission. We have to understand the ins and outs of this mission. And most importantly, we have to have a goal for that mission. What defines success in this mission? So with your patients, what defines success is going to be what their goals are, right? Like your patient wants to run a marathon in 4 months and they have this patellofemoral pain, or your patient wants to be able to throw a ball with their son and they've got this rotator cuff impingement. Or your patient wants to be able to, I actually had this one guy, he was the best, 80-year-old man. He could barely raise his arm overhead. And he surprised me. I said, I was a new therapist. This is years ago, but I'll never forget him. I was like, what are your goals? And I'm thinking he's going to say, I want to be able to what most people say, raise my arm overhead to wash my hands or whatever. His goal, he said, I just want to be able to hold my wife and let her rest her head on my shoulder at night. He had impingement pain, right? But it didn't bother him that he couldn't raise his arm overhead. What bothered him is that he and his wife couldn't snuggle like they used to. That was his goal. Now, I, in my mind, was like, well, I want to get you even better than that. But I needed to make sure, number one, I met his goals, right? So understand the mission. Had I never asked, I would have been working so hard to raise his arm overhead and maybe not met his goal. So understand the mission, whether that's for your patients or whether that's for your business. For your business, I find a lot of business owners go into business without a very clear mission. What defines success for your business? If you don't understand your mission, if you don't understand what's going to define success for your business, you're sure as heck going to have a hard time getting there, right? You don't know where you're going unless you know where you want to go. So number one, understand the mission. Number two, and we do this with our patients already, is generate a plan that addresses the issues and anticipates potential problems. So as PTs, I think we often think really well in the patient example. So let's go right there. So in our PT world, immediately when we're generating a plan, we've already evaluated them. We've already established the mission, right? We've already established the goals. Now we're going to evaluate them. And we're going to look at what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses? What specific weaknesses are limiting them from getting to their goals? And how are we going to address them systematically? And then a step further from that, we're going to try to anticipate what hiccups might we encounter. So again, if we take like a runner example, We know they want to run a marathon in 4 months. They've had this patellofemoral pain. We see the deficits. We see that their hip maybe is limiting them. We see that their calves are tight, that their ankle dorsiflexion is limited. We know we're going to have to address those issues, right? What hiccups might we run on along the way? Well, maybe this person is an executive and they travel a lot. And we're going to have to anticipate that they're going to have long days of travel. And we're going to have to give them tools to make sure that they're managing their mobility despite 5-6 hour travel on planes. So anticipating the needs related to the mission and the goal. That's number 2. So take that same scenario. You guys are already doing it with your patients successfully. Because I know if you're listening to this podcast that you're a successful PT already. You're already getting patients better and you're already have a goal-oriented mindset. So take those same goals, those same systems, now apply them to your business. You know what your end goal is. You know what your mission is, right? You've understood your mission now. Look at your own business strategies. Identify the weaknesses, right? Identify those weaknesses and identify the different components of it that you can change to make your business better. Anticipate hiccups along the way. So if you can really analyze a mission that way, you're gonna get to your goal much faster. Then the third step is communicating that mission. If we think about our military example, I have this great image of Jocko Willink motivating his team, and he's very clearly identifying all the components of this mission. Now, again, we do this already with our patients, right? They come in, we need them to know what they're signing up for. We need them to know what our expectations of them are in order to help them get better. So we're going to communicate, these are the things you need to do. This, I've been a PT 23 years. I've been a business owner just over 10 years. I remember, this isn't as easy as it sounds sometimes. I remember a time I had a patient, we've talked on the podcast before about how I do a lot of dry needling. I had a patient, this is a communication error. I had a patient who came to us for dry needling. He had some chronic pain that he wasn't able to respond to PT elsewhere, all different types of therapies, all different clinicians, different modalities from other doctors. And he heard about dry needling. So he came to us and he's like, I heard about dry needling. I think this can help me. I'm like, great, let's go. He's like, one thing, I'm deathly afraid of needles. And he actually was a male nurse. So he used needles all the time. He's like, I'm fine with putting needles in other people. It's like, you talk about needles for me, I get a little goofy, So I'm like, no problem. We're going to go through what you should expect very clearly, right? This is the communication stage of the mission. So I tell him, I'm going to very clearly describe to you what's happening when we needle you, and that should help alleviate some of your concerns. So I started to give him the same rundown that I gave most of my patients consistently, and it worked for them. I said, listen, what we do is we're going to find an area that's dysfunctional. I'm going to put the needle in, and then I pissed in the needle. That's how I said it. And then I pissed in the needle. His eyes bug-eyed. He goes, you did what in the needle? And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't do that in the needle. I pissed in PISTON. I would never do that So anyway, the point is, sometimes you think you're being very clear, but communication's a two-way street. You need to look at your audience and make sure they're getting the message you're intending to send, right? So apply this to the business world. You might think you're being clear in your communication, but your staff, your employees, your support staff, you may not have any direct employees initially, but you're going to hire or contract out help along the way, whether it's for your website, whether it's for, I have a video team here that's amazing. You need to make sure that you're communicating in a way that you think they'll understand, but you need to pay attention and make sure they're hearing what you think you're saying, because that poor patient thought I did something very odd in the needle. And had I not noticed that could have gone very wrong. So apply that to your business model as well. Make sure you're communicating well. Communication is so important. I'm going to give another example that's more related directly to my business and how it can help your business. When I first started, I've told this before, but within, I think 2 years, the business grew to a place where I needed help. I needed an administrator to make my time more efficient. So I hired someone on a recommendation. He's still with us today. He's amazing. But when he and I first started working together, our communication needed help. We weren't exactly understanding each other and what our needs were to work together as a team. And one of the first things that happened was I was trying to be a good leader. I was trying to communicate the things that I thought would help get the job done systematically. And I wasn't delivering the right expectations though. So essentially what happened was I would email a list of like, can you do this? I would love if you could do this, blah, blah, blah. Just a list of things, right? And then I wasn't giving follow-up from that at first. So what I realized is I was getting more and more stressed out because I was now thinking, I asked my administrator if he could do these things, and I don't know if he's working on them or not. So I felt my stress go like this. And finally, it didn't take me long, thank God. 2 weeks into that, I was like, oh my God, I'm more stressed out now. How could this happen? I thought, duh, you got to communicate with him. So I went to him. I said, listen, I hired you to take stress off me, but now what I find is I'm stressing about what I've asked you to do, and then I'm stressing about whether you've done what I've asked you to do. So we came out with a system where credit to him, he was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. That's the last thing I want. But had I not gotten that communication piece together and if I let it go any further than 2 weeks, trust me, I would have stewed, and it would have built and built and built to a point where maybe it wasn't recoverable. But kudos to this admin is he was like, oh God, no, we got to fix that. All right, and together we came up with a system. So I will say these things need to get done. He'll give me a follow-up. It's a cadence that now we're in a groove with, and he's still with me today, and we work really well together. So on the business side, communication is really important, just the same. The fourth step of this mission strategy, mission method, is celebrate small and big wins. So again, I have this image of the soldiers on the battlefield, or the Navy SEAL team dropping in the helicopter. All those sexy images help me wrap my head around what we're really doing here, what we're really doing when we're trying to accomplish a goal in our business and for our patients. And every great leader takes a moment to celebrate the wins, right? You got to celebrate the wins so you can move on. In a military environment, you take out a single target, you're celebrating that, not over celebrating, not so much that you're missing the guy that might be behind you, but you're like, heck yeah, I got that. I nailed that. We nailed that. We did that together. Let's go. And then you're motivated to continue to win and achieve and beat those goals time and time again. So that's another thing that I see from my business colleagues sometimes is that they're so caught up in their own stress, they're not taking the time to be like, whoa, that was a big win. Wow, I met with that doctor. That went really well. He seemed to understand what I was talking about. We seem on the same page. That's a big win. Or even just getting a single patient better that wasn't able to get better somewhere else. That's a big win. So don't be remiss in celebrating your own big wins in your business and with your patients, because that's what's going to continue to drive you and your team to continue to do better, to continue to meet those goals and those missions. It's just so valuable. And then the last piece of that, though, is at the end of a mission, recap that mission. This I tend to think of more as like reviewing game film, right? So a lot of professional athletes, even college athletes, even our high school athletes here, they have an amazing lacrosse team right down the road. Those guys review the game film all the time. And what that does is it allows them to look and strategize at, hey, let's celebrate the wins. Wow, that was a great play. We all worked together. But also, what could we do better? And by analyzing past missions and right out of the gates, like you finish a mission, you celebrate the win. Next thing you do is, what did we do well? What could we do better? What that does is it establishes patterns. Again, this is a strategy you already use, I guarantee it. In PT, we use clinical patterning as part of our strategy for getting patients better. And what clinical patterning is when we take a patient and we test, retest, and when we see what works, our brain turns that into a pattern. And then you see 10, 20, 100, 1,000, 10,000 of those patients with that same type of presentation. Now, all of a sudden, you recognize it before you have to do 8 tests. You recognize it way earlier than you would have before. The same thing can happen with your business. So when you work on a particular goal or mission for yourself with your business, take the time to analyze it afterward. What did you do well? What didn't you do so well? Look at the game film. What could you have done better? Just by spending a couple minutes after every mission and analyzing what could be done better, you're going to find that you're developing patterning and you're going to succeed more quickly the next time. And you're going to do it so effortlessly that you're not even going to realize you're doing it after a while. I want to give a patient example to highlight this. This was years ago. I want to say, gosh, it was probably 18 years ago. But again, one of those patients that will forever stand in my mind. So I'd been out, let's say 5 years or so. At the time, I was doing a lot of pool therapy. And it was a busy environment. I mean, I've talked to you about that before. It was an insurance-based world. I had a great team that I worked with. But for the most part, I was in the trenches in that pool, sometimes having 8 to 10 patients at once. But this one particular patient came in and we were treating her actually for like a back radiculopathy type thing. She had a pretty significant history, had a dural leak at one point. But long story short, I'd been treating her for at least, I'd say 12 sessions. And every time she came in, we had our conversation. We made lots of eye contact because I think eye contact's huge important. And we talked. And she was heading in the right direction. One day, however, she came in, she walked in the pool, and I was talking to her. Something was different. I could not put my finger on it, and I kept talking to her, in fact, to try to pull out what was different. She just was different. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I did start asking questions because I was like, something's off. I flat out said to her, I was like, hey, did you change anything? Anything different? She's like, no, I'm a little tired, but I didn't really change anything. Did you change your medications? Because that's a big red flag, She's like, no, I didn't change my medications. I'm like, all right. I'm still looking at her, watching her closely. Finally, after about literally a few minutes of that, I was like, listen, I think we need to get you out of the pool. Something's not sitting right today. She argued with me, of course, because she wanted us to get better. And she's like, no, I need to be here. I'm in pain. I'm like, I know you're in pain, but I'm telling you, let's get you out of the pool. Now, I called someone else in the pool with me because I was so nervous about her. Again, didn't really know why. Didn't have any concrete evidence, but walked out the pool with her into the locker room. Had another staff member come in and make sure my other patients were doing okay. I was in the locker room with her, and all of a sudden she started having a grand mal seizure. And we handled it, Thank God she wasn't in the pool because that would have been a whole nother mess. She was in the locker room. She had the seizure. We kept her contained. She was safe. Obviously, at that point, I left out. I'd already called her husband to pick her up because I was like, you're not driving. Something's off. So by that point, right after that, her husband came. We called the paramedics, but they said, no problem, just bring her to the hospital. Long story short, my clinical patterning after only 5 years told me something was not right. And I listened to it. So clinical patterning can happen with your patients. It can happen in your business. Take the time to assess your own business strategies and what's working and what's not working. It may not be as dramatic as preventing someone from drowning in a pool during a grand mal seizure or at least having other complications, but in terms of the business world, it's still going to have a great effect. And it's more powerful than you can really put concrete tabs on. So if you want to successfully hit your mission time and time again, take these 5 steps. Emulate that military personnel. Emulate that professional athlete of whatever sort. Emulate your own practices as a clinician and listen to those 5 steps. Establish your mission and your goals for that mission. Come up with a plan that targets meeting that mission and goal for yourself. Anticipate hiccups along the road. Communicate the strategies effectively with yourself and with your team around you. celebrate small and big wins, and lastly, study the game film. Using those 5 strategies is going to help you succeed time and time again, faster and faster, and more effectively as a clinician, but also more importantly for this podcast, as a business leader. It's great sharing these stories with you. Thank you for inviting me into your family room and listening. I'd love to share more with you. So if you want to hear more, like and subscribe to our channel. Click the link in the description for the ebook, for the free ebook, and let us know what you think. If you have any questions, please reach out.